"I will take care of you," the poor boy told the CEO's daughter. 15 years later, he came back. "Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments." 15 years ago, the summer storm was brutal, turning the pristine lawns of the Carson estate into a swamp of mud and broken hydrangeas. But for 10-year-old Elise Carson, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging inside the mansion. She sat on the cold concrete floor of the old gardening shed, her knees pulled up to her chest, sobbing so hard her ribs ached. She was wearing her expensive birthday dress, pink silk and lace, now ruined by dirt and rain. The shed door creaked open. Elise didn't look up. She expected it to be her father, Richard Carson, coming to yell at her again, coming to tell her that crying was weak, that Carsons didn't show emotion, that she was an embarrassment for tripping during the gala introduction. Elise? It wasn't her father. The voice was soft, rough, around the edges, and trembling slightly. Elise looked up through her tear-blurred vision. Standing in the doorway, dripping wet, was Elijah Brown. He was 12. He was the groundskeeper's son. He wore hand-me-down clothes that were too big for his scrawny frame, and his sneakers were held together by duct tape. To the world, he was invisible. To Elise, he was the only person who ever listened. "Go away, Elijah," Elise hiccuped, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "If Daddy finds you here, he'll fire your father. He's really mad tonight." Elijah didn't leave. Instead, he stepped inside and closed the door against the wind. He walked over and sat on the dirty floor next to her, ignoring the mud staining his jeans. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly squashed chocolate bar. It was the cheap kind, the kind he saved his allowance for weeks to buy. "I saw him yelling at you," Elijah said quietly. He broke the chocolate in half and offered her the bigger piece. "He's wrong. You know, you didn't ruin the party. You just fell." Elise took the chocolate, her hands shaking. "He said I'm useless. He said I'll never be strong enough to run the company. He said he wished he had a son." The words hung heavy in the damp air. Elijah's jaw tightened. Even at 12, there was a fierce, protective fire in his dark eyes. He looked at the girl who lived in a castle but felt like a prisoner. He hated Richard Carson. He hated the way the man looked through Elijah's father like he was furniture, but mostly he hated the way he made Elise feel small. "Listen to me," Elijah said, his voice surprisingly steady. He turned to face her, grabbing her small, cold hand in his. "You're not useless. You're smarter than him. You know all the names of the flowers in the garden. He doesn't know a single one." Elise managed a weak, watery smile. "Flowers don't matter in business, Elijah." "Maybe they should," he countered. He squeezed her hand. "One day I'm going to get out of here," Elijah vowed. It wasn't a child's fantasy. It sounded like a contract. "I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make so much money that nobody can ever tell me what to do. And when I do," he looked her dead in the eye, "I will take care of you, Elise, I promise. You won't ever have to cry because of him again. I'll buy you a whole garden. I'll buy you the whole world if you want it." Elise looked at him, at his dirty knees, his kind eyes, his absolute sincerity. For a moment, she believed him. "You promise?" she whispered. "I promise," Elijah said. But promises made in gardening sheds are fragile things. The door burst open with a crash. Richard Carson stood there, silhouetted by the lightning, looking like a giant. Behind him stood 2 security guards. "Get your hands off my daughter," Richard roared. What happened next was a blur of violence and shouting. Elijah was ripped away from her. Elise screamed, trying to hold on to him, but she was held back. She watched, helplessly, as Elijah was dragged out into the rain. She heard her father firing the groundskeeper on the spot. She heard the order to vacate the premises within the hour. Elijah looked back one last time before he disappeared into the storm. His face was bloody from where he had been shoved, but his eyes were locked on hers. "I promise." That was the last time Elise Carson saw Elijah Brown. Present day, 15 years later, New York City did not care about promises. It cared about profit margins, stock prices, and blood. Elise Carson stood at the window of her office on the 50th floor of the Carson Tower. The view was magnificent. Central Park, the skyline, the empire her father had built. But it was all a mirage. Elise was 25 now. She was beautiful, poised, and dressed in a tailored cream suit that cost more than Elijah's family probably made in a year back then. She had done everything right. She had gone to Ivy League schools. She had taken over as CEO when her father had his. stroke 2 years ago. But she had inherited a sinking ship. Her father's arrogance had hidden decades of debt. He had leveraged the company to the hilt, made bad bets, and committed fraud to cover it up. Now that he was in a private care facility, oblivious to the world, Elise was left holding the grenade. The door to her office opened. "Ms. Carson." It was Marcus, her frantic personal assistant. He looked pale. "They're here," Marcus whispered. "The board members, and the representative from Zenith Capital." Elise closed her eyes for a second, inhaling deeply. Zenith Capital, the mysterious investment firm that had been quietly buying up Carson Industries' debt for the last 6 months. They were the sharks circling the water. Today was the kill. "Do we know who the CEO of Zenith is yet?" Elise asked, turning around. Her face was a mask of calm composure. "No," Marcus shook his head. "He's a ghost. He operates out of London and Singapore. They say he's never lost a takeover battle. They call him the Reaper." Elise straightened her jacket. "Well, let's go meet the Reaper. If he wants my company, he's going to have to look me in the eye when he takes it." She walked out of her office, the click of her heels echoing like gunfire in the silent hallway. She was terrified. She had no liquidity left. The banks had frozen her credit lines yesterday. If she couldn't convince Zenith to restructure the debt, Carson Industries would be liquidated by Friday. Her father's legacy, her home, her employees, everything would be gone. She pushed open the double doors to the boardroom. The room was full of old men in gray suits, the board of directors who had watched her father destroy the company and done nothing. They looked at her with pity and annoyance. But at the head of the table, in the seat her father used to occupy, sat a man she didn't know. He was looking out the window, his back to the room. The chair swiveled slowly as she entered. Elise faltered in her step. The man was stunning. That was the first thing that hit her. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He had dark hair, styled with precision, and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He radiated power, the kind of power that made the air in the room feel heavy. He didn't stand up when she entered. He just watched her. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they were cold, unreadable, calculating, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Miss Carson," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, and touched with an accent she couldn't quite place. It was the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed. "You're late." "I'm precisely on time, Mr. Elise paused, waiting for a name. "King," he said. "Elias King." Elise walked to the opposite end of the table. She placed her hands on the mahogany surface, refusing to sit. She needed to feel tall. "Mr. King, I assume you're here to discuss the debt restructuring proposal I sent over." Elias King picked up the blue folder in front of him. Elise's proposal. He looked at it for a second, then tossed it casually into the trash bin beside him without opening it. The sound of the folder hitting the metal bin echoed in the silent room. Elise felt her face flush with anger. "That took my team a week to prepare." "It was a waste of a week," Elias replied coolly. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I didn't come here to restructure your debt, Ms. Carson. I didn't come here to save your father's failing legacy." "Then why are you here?" Elise demanded, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. Elias King stood up. He was tall, dominating the room effortlessly. He walked slowly around the table, heading toward her. The board members seemed to shrink back as he passed. He stopped just inches from her. He smelled of rain and expensive sandalwood. He looked down at her, and for a split second, Elise felt a strange, jarring sense of déjà vu. Something in the tilt of his head, something in the intensity of his gaze. But it was impossible. "I'm here to collect," Elias said softly, so only she could hear. "You owe Zenith Capital $400 million. You have until midnight to pay, or I take everything." "I don't have that kind of money," Elise whispered, trapped by his gaze. "You know I don't." "I know," Elias smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a predator's smile. "Which brings us to option B." "What is option B?" "Marriage," Elias said. The word dropped like a stone. Elise stared at him, thinking she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "Marriage," he repeated. "A merger, if you prefer the term. You marry me. I absorb the debt. Your father's company stays intact under my control, and you keep your position as a figurehead. The Carson name survives." "You're insane," Elise breathed. "Why would you want to marry me? You don't even know me." Elias King leaned in closer. His eyes searched hers. looking for something deep inside. "Oh, I know you, Elise," he whispered darkly. "I know exactly who you are. The question is, do you remember who I am?" The question hung in the air, sharp and suffocating. "Do you remember who I am?" Elise stared at him. She searched the hard planes of his face, the expensive haircut, the cruel set of his mouth. She looked for a trace of familiarity, but she found none. The man standing before her was a stranger, a statue carved from ice and resentment. "I don't know what games you're playing," Elise said, her voice shaking slightly, "but I have never met you in my life." Elias King let out a low, dry laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor. "Of course," he murmured, turning away from her to address the room. "Gentlemen, leave us." The board members hesitated. One of them, old Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "Mr. King, this is highly irregular. We haven't voted on the acquisition. Get out." Elias didn't shout. He didn't have to. The command was absolute. Chairs scraped against the floor. Papers were gathered hastily. Within 30 seconds, the room was empty. The heavy double doors clicked shut, leaving Elise alone with the wolf. Elias walked over to the window, looking out at the storm that was battering the glass, a mirror image of the day he had been exiled. "It was raining like this the last time we spoke," he said, his back to her. "You were wearing a pink dress. You were crying because your father told you that you were weak." Elise felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Her breath hitched. How could he know that? She had never told anyone about the shed, about the day Elijah left. It was her most guarded memory. "I gave you a chocolate bar," Elias continued, turning slowly to face her. "Half of it anyway. It was all I had." Elise's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, filling with shock. She looked at him again, really looked. Beneath the tailored suit, beneath the hardness of 15 years, she saw the shadow of the boy with the dark, intense eyes. "Elijah," she whispered. The name felt foreign, on her tongue after so long. "Elijah Brown?" "Elias King now," he corrected coldly. "Elijah Brown died the day your father threw him into the mud like garbage." "Oh my God!" Elise took a step forward, her heart hammering. "Everyone said, we tried to find you. I looked for you. My father said you moved away." "Your father," Elias spat the word, walking toward her until he was looming over her, "made sure my father never worked in this state again. We lived in a car for 6 months, Elise. We ate out of dumpsters while you ate off silver platters." Elise recoiled as if he had slapped her. "I didn't know," she stammered. "I was 10, Elijah. I wrote letters. I tried." "Stop," he cut her off. "I don't want your pity, and I definitely don't want your excuses." He walked to the head of the table and slammed his hand down on the mahogany surface. "I made a promise that day," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Do you remember it?" Elise nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "You said you would take care of me." "I said I would buy the whole world if I had to," Elias corrected. "I said no one would ever tell me what to do again." He gestured around the opulent boardroom. "I kept my end of the bargain. I worked. I fought. I built Zenith Capital from nothing, and now I own the world. Or at least, the parts of it that matter." He looked at her with a mix of triumph and contempt. "And now I'm here to fulfill the last part. I'm going to take care of you, Elise. Just like I said." "By blackmailing me?" Elise asked, finding her voice. The shock was fading, replaced by a spark of anger. "By forcing me into a marriage I don't want? That's not taking care of me, Elijah. That's owning me. It's business." Elias shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. "You need $400 million. I need a wife to secure my citizenship status here, and to legitimize my acquisition of a legacy company. It's a transaction." "I'm not a transaction," Elise shouted. "I am a person. I am the CEO of this company. You are the captain of a sinking ship," Elias shouted back, his composure finally cracking. "Look at the numbers, Elise. You're bankrupt. Your father stole the pension funds. If I don't step in, you go to prison for his crimes. Is that what you want?" Elise froze. "Prison? What are you talking about?" Elias picked up the blue folder from the trash can and threw it on the table. It slid across and stopped in front of her. "Read page 10. Your signature is on the audit reports, the fraudulent ones. Your father set you up, Elise. He made you the fall guy before his stroke." Elise opened the folder with trembling fingers. She scanned the lines. Her blood ran cold. He was right. There were transfers, approvals, all signed with her digital key. She hadn't known. She had trusted the CFO. She looked up at Elias. He wasn't gloating anymore. He looked grim. I can make the charges disappear, Elias said quietly. I own the debt. I control the narrative. If we merge, the internal audit goes away. You stay free. The employees keep their jobs. The Carson name remains untarnished. And the price? Elise asked, her voice barely a whisper. You belong to me, Elias said. You marry me. You live in my house. You wear my ring. You do exactly what I say. Elise looked at him. The boy who had shared his chocolate was gone. In his place was a man who used generosity as a trap. Why? She asked. Why go to all this trouble? If you hate me, why? Save me. Elias walked closer, invading her personal space. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric, but his eyes were cold as ice. Because I promised, he whispered, and because watching you fall isn't enough, Elise. I want to be the one who catches you, and I want you to know every single day that you only exist because I allow it. He pulled a contract from his inside jacket pocket and laid it on the table next to a heavy fountain pen. Midnight, he said. Sign it and the wire transfer goes through. Don't sign it and the police will be here by breakfast. Elise looked at the paper. Prenuptial agreement and merger contract. She looked at the door. She could run, but where? To jail? To poverty? She thought of Marcus, her assistant. She thought of the 5,000 employees in the factories who would lose their pensions. She thought of her father, lying in a hospital bed, the man who had ruined her life twice, once by raising her, and once by setting her up. And she thought of the boy in the shed. She picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like a weapon. If I do this, Elise said, looking up at him, I will never forgive you. Elias smirked. It was a dark, broken expression. Good, he said. Hate is a powerful motivator. It kept me alive for 15 years. Maybe it will help you survive me. Elise pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. Elise Carson. She signed her life away. Elias watched her, his eyes, dark with satisfaction and something else, something that looked dangerously like pain. He picked up the contract, blowing on the ink to dry it. Done, he said. He checked his watch. Go pack a bag, Mrs. King. We leave for the estate in an hour. Elise didn't go back to her apartment. She didn't have time. Elias had a car waiting downstairs. She sat in the back of the black Maybach, watching the city blur by through the rain-streaked window. She felt numb. Next to her, Elias was on his phone, barking orders in Mandarin, then switching effortlessly to German. He ignored her completely. They pulled up to a massive, ultra-modern building on Billionaire's Row, the penthouse. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened, Elise stepped into a world of stark luxury. Everything was black marble, chrome, and floor-to-ceiling glass. It was beautiful, but it felt like a mausoleum. The guest room is down the hall to the left, Elias said, tossing his keys onto a console table. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late. Where are you going? Elise asked as he turned toward the study. To work, he said without looking back. I just spent $400 million. I need to make it back. Elias, she called out. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. He didn't turn around. That boy, she said, her voice trembling. The one who gave me the chocolate. Is he completely gone? Elias stood frozen for a long moment. The muscles in his back tensed under the expensive suit. He died. Hungry, Elise, he said, his voice low and rough. Don't go looking for ghosts in this house. You won't like what you find. He slammed the door shut. Elise stood alone in the massive living room. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. She was safe from the police. She was safe from bankruptcy. But as she looked at the locked door of his study, she realized the terrifying truth. She was trapped in a cage with the one man who had every reason to destroy her. And the worst part was, she still remembered how his hand felt when he promised to save her. 3 days later, there were no flowers. There was no music. There was only the hum of the air conditioner in the city hall clerk's office and the scratching of a cheap ballpoint pen. Elise wore a gray wool dress that blended into the walls. Elias wore black, always black. Do you, Elias King, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The clerk asked, looking bored. He had clearly seen enough green card marriages to recognize a business arrangement when he saw one. I do, Elias said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. He didn't look at Elise. He looked at the paperwork. And do you, Elise Carson, Elise hesitated. She felt the weight of the last 3 days crushing her, the realization that she was legally binding herself to a man who had admitted to buying her debt, just to own her. She looked at Elias. He turned his head slightly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. A silent warning. The prison cell or the ring. Choose. I do, Elise whispered. Rings? The clerk asked. Elias reached into his pocket. He pulled out a ring box. He took Elise's left hand. His grip was cool and firm. He slid the ring onto her finger. It wasn't a modest band. It was a diamond so large it was almost vulgar. A flawless emerald-cut stone that caught the fluorescent light and shattered it. It was heavy. It felt less like jewelry, and more like a shackle. With this ring, Elias said, I thee wed. He didn't kiss her. He didn't even smile. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. The clerk stamped the paper. Thump. Next. They walked out into the humid afternoon. The paparazzi were waiting. Elias had tipped them off. Of course he had. This was part of the deal. Public image. As soon as the flashbulbs popped, Elias changed. He grabbed Elise's hand, interlacing their fingers. He pulled her close to his side, shielding her from the crowd. He leaned down and whispered in her ear. Smile, he commanded softly. You're the happiest woman in New York. You just saved your company. Elise forced a smile. It felt like her face was cracking. Mr. King, is it true you bought Carson Industries? Is it a hostile takeover? It's a love match, Elias declared to the cameras, his voice smooth as silk. I've admired Elise for years. We're looking forward to building our future together. He ushered her into the waiting car. As soon as the door closed and the tinted windows hid them, he dropped her hand as if it burned him. He opened his laptop. The husband was gone. The CEO was back. 2 weeks later, marriage to Elias King was silent. That was the surprise. Elise had expected cruelty. She had expected him to lord his power over her, to humiliate her daily. Instead, he simply ignored her. They lived in the same massive penthouse, but they were like ghosts, haunting different wings. He left before she woke up. He returned after she went to sleep. The only evidence of his existence was the black Amex card he left on the kitchen counter with a note. Buy clothes. You look like a pauper. Elise went to work at Carson Industries every day, and to her shock, Elias kept his word. The debt collectors stopped calling. The supply chains were unlocked. A massive infusion of capital, $50 million, had hit the accounts on the morning of their wedding. He had saved the company. He had saved the jobs. But at home, he remained a stranger. One rainy Tuesday, Elise came home early. Migraine was splitting her head open. She walked into the penthouse, kicking off her heels. Hello? She called out. Silence. She walked toward the kitchen for water, but stopped when she noticed the door to Elias's private study was ajar. She had never been inside. He kept it locked. Don't go looking for ghosts, he had said. But today the cleaners must have bumped it. It was open a crack. Curiosity, dangerous and irresistible, pulled her toward it. She pushed the door open. The room was dark, smelling of leather and that sandalwood cologne he wore. It was lined with books from floor to ceiling. Elise stepped inside. It felt like trespassing. It felt like walking into his mind. She walked to the massive desk. It was organized with military precision, but on the side table there was a stack of folders. Physical files, not digital. The label on the top folder caught her eye. It didn't say Zenith Capital or Acquisitions. It said EC 2015 to present. EC Elise Carson. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached out and opened the folder. It wasn't a dossier of crimes. It was her life. There were photos. A photo of her at her high school graduation, standing alone because her father was too busy to attend. The angle was from a distance, behind a tree. A photo of her first day at Carson Industries, looking terrified in an elevator. A photo of her crying on a park bench 3 years ago, when her ex-fiancé had cheated on her. He's been watching me, Elise whispered, a chill running through her veins. He's been stalking me for 10 years. But then she saw the papers underneath the photos. Receipts, bank transfers, emails. She picked one up. It was dated 5 years ago. Recipient, New York Times. Subject, kill the story on Elise Carson's breakdown. Amount, $50,000 donation. Elise gasped. She remembered that. She had a panic attack at a charity gala. A journalist had seen it. She thought it was a miracle the story never ran. It wasn't a miracle. It was Elias. She picked up another paper. Recipient: the Baker Street Patisserie. Note: keep the shop open. Cover the rent for the next 2 years. Anonymous. That was her favorite bakery. The one she went to when she was sad. It was about to close, and then suddenly stayed open. Elias had paid for it. There were dozens of them. He had paid off a blackmailer who threatened to leak her private emails. He had secretly bought her mother's jewelry at auction when her father sold it, and stored it in a vault. She saw the receipt for the safety deposit box. He hadn't just been watching her. He had been protecting her. From the shadows. From across the ocean. While he was building his empire, while he supposedly hated her family, he was quietly using his money to smooth the path beneath her feet. Why? Elise whispered, staring at the papers. If you hate me, why? I told you not to go in there. The voice came from the doorway. Low. Dangerous. Elise spun around. Elias was standing there. He had taken off his jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked tired, and he looked furious. He crossed the room in 3 strides, snatching the folder from her hands. This is private, he snarled, slamming the folder shut. Private? Elise challenged, her fear replaced by a confusing rush of adrenaline. That's my life, Elias. You've been stalking me. I've been monitoring an investment, he lied, but his eyes wouldn't meet hers. Bullshit. Elise stepped closer. You paid the times to kill a story. You saved the bakery. You bought my mother's emeralds. That's not an investment. That's... She stopped. She didn't know what it was. Obsession? Guilt? Love? That's control, Elias said coldly. I knew one day I would come for the company. I needed you stable. I needed you safe until I was ready to take you. Liar, Elise said. She reached out and grabbed his arm. The muscle was rock hard beneath the cotton. You didn't do this to destroy me. You did it because you care. Elias ripped his arm away. He backed her up against the desk, his hands gripping the edge on either side of her, trapping her. His face was inches from hers. The mask was slipping. The cold CEO was cracking, revealing the boy underneath. The boy who was hurt, angry, and desperate. Care? He laughed, a harsh sound. You think I care about the daughter of the man who ruined my life? Who let my father drink himself to death in a trailer park because he couldn't get a job? Elias, I watched you, yes, he hissed. I watched you live the life I should have had. I watched you waste tears on men who didn't deserve you. I watched you try to please a father who hated you. He leaned in, his forehead almost touching hers. I didn't protect you because I loved you, Elise. I protected you because you were mine. Even then, you were always mine. I just hadn't come to collect yet. The air in the room was electric. It wasn't fear anymore. It was raw, volatile tension. So I'm just a possession? Elise whispered, refusing to look away. Like the company? Like the penthouse? Yes. Elias lied, but his eyes betrayed him. His gaze dropped to her lips. His breathing was ragged. Then why are you looking at me like you want to kiss me? Elise asked. Elias froze. For a second it looked like he would. He leaned in, his eyes closing, drawn by a magnetic force he couldn't control. Then he pulled back violently. He pushed off the desk and turned his back on her. Get out, he said. His voice was shaking. Elias, get out, he roared, sweeping a stack of books off the desk. They crashed to the floor. Get out before I forget that I'm supposed to hate you. Elise backed away, her heart pounding in her throat. She left the room. She heard the door slam and lock behind her. She stood in the hallway staring at the wood. He was a monster. He was a savior. He was a liar. And for the first time since the wedding, Elise didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a puzzle piece that had finally found its match. He had been watching her for 15 years. Well, 2 could play at that game. Okay, Elias, she whispered to the closed door. You want to play house? Let's play. 3 days of silence had passed since the incident in the study. Elias had retreated behind his walls of ice, speaking only in monosyllables. Yes. No. The car is ready. But tonight was unavoidable. The annual Winter Solstice Gala, the most important social event of the New York calendar. It was their first public appearance as a married couple since the courthouse. Elise stood in front of the mirror in the master bedroom. On the bed lay a box. It had arrived an hour ago with a note. Wear this. The gray dress you picked is too timid. Elise touched the fabric. It was a gown of midnight blue velvet, off the shoulder with a slit that ran dangerously high up the thigh. It was stunning. It was bold. It was a dress for a queen, not a figurehead. And of course it fit perfectly, because he knew her. Measurements. Because he had been watching. She put it on. The velvet hugged her curves like a second skin. She put on the sapphire earrings he had provided. When she walked out into the living room, Elias was waiting. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking out at the city lights. He wore a tuxedo that was cut sharp enough to draw blood. He looked devastating. He turned around at the sound of her footsteps. His hands froze on his cuffs. His eyes swept over her, starting from the heels, up the slit of the dress to the curve of her neck. His gaze was physical, heavy. For a moment, the air left the room. "Well?" Elise asked, feeling self-conscious under his scrutiny. "Is it timid enough?" Elias cleared his throat, looking away, breaking the spell. "It's adequate," he lied. His voice was rougher than usual. "The color suits you. It's the color of a bruise." "You're charming as always, Elias." Elise shot back, grabbing her clutch. "I'm not here to charm you, Elise. I'm here to display. You. Let's go. The sharks are hungry." The ballroom was a sea of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. As soon as Elias and Elise entered, the room went quiet. Heads turned. Whispers started. "That's him, the Reaper, and her, the daughter of the fraud. How can she show her face?" Elise kept her chin high, but inside she was crumbling. She felt the judgment like physical blows. Every glance felt like an accusation. "You don't belong here. Your father stole our money." She tightened her grip on Elias's arm. To her surprise, he tightened his arm against his side, pinning her hand there securely. A silent anchor. "Ignore them," Elias murmured, leaning down slightly. "They're sheep. They bleat because they're afraid of the wolf." "They hate me," Elise whispered. "They hate that you survived," Elias corrected. "Don't look down. Never look down." They navigated the room. Elias was a force of nature. He greeted rivals with a shark-like grin, dominating conversations. Elise played her, part the dutiful wife, but she felt fragile. Then he appeared. Charles Whitmore, an old banking tycoon, a former friend of her father and one of the men who had lost the most in the Carson scandal. He blocked their path near the champagne tower. He was drunk, his face flushed. "Well, well," Charles slurred, looking Elise up and down with open disgust. "If it isn't the little princess. Spending our pension money on velvet, I see." The conversation around them stopped. The circle widened. People wanted a show. Elise went pale. "Mr. Whitmore, Don't speak to me," Charles spat. "You have some nerve showing up here. Your father is rotting in a facility, and you're here playing dress-up with your new ATM machine." He gestured rudely at Elias. "Charles," Elias said. His voice was calm, almost pleasant, but the temperature around him dropped 10 degrees. "I think you've had enough to drink." "I haven't had enough until I see this family ruined," Charles sneered, stepping closer to Elise. "Tell me, darling, how much did he pay for you? Or did you sell yourself by the hour first to cover the debts?" The insult was gross, vile. Elise gasped, tears of humiliation stinging her eyes. She tried to step back, to flee, but Elias didn't let her move. He released her arm and took one slow step forward. He towered over Whitmore. The pleasant mask vanished. In its place was pure, unadulterated violence contained in a tuxedo. "Apologize," Elias said. The word was a whisper, but it carried to the back of the room. "Or what?" Whitmore laughed nervously. "You'll sue me? I know who you are, King. You're gutter trash. Everyone knows your father was the drunk groundskeeper who—" Elias moved so fast no one saw it happen. One hand shot out and gripped Whitmore by the throat. He didn't squeeze, not yet, but he pushed him back until Whitmore collided with a marble pillar. Champagne glasses shattered on the floor. Gasps erupted. Security started to move, then stopped when they saw who it was. Nobody touched Elias King. "You can insult me," Elias said, his voice deadly low, his face inches from the terrified banker. "You can call me trash. I don't care. But if you ever speak to my wife with anything less than absolute reverence, I will buy your bank tomorrow morning, dismantle it by noon, and leave you destitute by dinner." Whitmore gagged, clawing at Elias's hand. "Do you understand me?" Elias roared, shaking him. "Yes," Whitmore choked out. "Yes." Elias released him. Whitmore slid down the pillar, Coughing, Elias straightened his jacket. He looked around the silent ballroom. His gaze swept over the crowd, the socialites, the bankers, the gossips. "Does anyone else have a comment on my wife's dress?" he asked loudly. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. "Good," Elias said. He turned to Elise. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked protective, fiercely, possessively protective. He held out his hand. "Let's go," he said. "The air in here is stale." The car sped through the rainy streets of Manhattan. The partition was up. They were alone in the dark leather interior. Elise was trembling. The adrenaline dump was hitting her hard. She looked at Elias. He was staring out the window, his jaw clenched, rubbing his knuckles where he had grabbed Whitmore. "You assaulted him," Elise whispered. "In front of half of Wall Street. He deserved worse," Elias muttered, without turning. "Why?" Elise asked. Her voice cracked. "You hate me, Elias. You told me 3 days ago that I'm just a possession. Why would you risk your reputation to defend me?" Elias finally looked at her. The passing streetlights illuminated the sharp angles of his face. He looked conflicted, tortured. "I didn't defend you because you're a possession, Elise." "Then why?" "Because he made you cry," Elias said simply. The answer hung in the air. It was irrational. It was raw. "You said," Elise's voice shook, "you said 15 years ago that you wouldn't let anyone make me cry." "Again." "I failed," Elias said bitterly. "I made you cry 3 days ago. That's different." "Is it?" He moved across the seat. Suddenly, the space between them vanished. He was right there. "I hate him," Elias whispered, his eyes searching hers. "I hate your father. I hate this world. But when he looked at you like that, I wanted to kill him." He reached out. His hand, warm and rough, cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed away a stray tear. "You drive me insane, Elise. I spent 10 years building a fortress to keep people out, and you walked right in and set it on fire." "Elias," she breathed, leaning into his touch. "I'm not your enemy, aren't you?" he asked. His voice dropped to a murmur. "You're the only thing that can hurt me." He looked at her mouth. This time he didn't pull back. "Tell me to stop," he warned her. "Tell me to stop, Elise, because I can't do it myself." Elise looked at the man who had haunted her past and saved her present, the man who had choked a banker. For insulting her honor, she didn't want him to stop. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't stop." Elias groaned, a low sound of surrender. He crashed his mouth onto hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was hungry, desperate, and laden with 15 years of suppressed emotion. It tasted of champagne and rain and fury. Elise wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, tangling her fingers in his hair. The velvet of her dress rubbed against his tuxedo. He pulled her into his lap, not breaking the kiss. The car turned a corner, but they didn't notice. For the first time, the transaction was forgotten. There was no debt, no contract. There was just the boy from the garden and the girl who needed saving, finally finding each other in the storm. Sunlight streamed into the master bedroom. Elise woke up. She was alone in the massive bed, but the sheets on the other side were rumpled. She sat up, clutching the duvet to her chest, memories of the night before flooding back. The car, the elevator, the way he had carried her to this bed as if she were precious. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. The door opened. Elias walked in. He was already dressed in a suit, holding a cup of coffee, but the air was different. The ice was gone. He walked to the side of the bed and sat down. He placed the coffee on the nightstand. He looked at her, really looked at her, with clear, dark eyes. "We need to talk," he said. Elise's stomach dropped. Was he going to regret it? Was he going to say it was a mistake? "About what?" she asked carefully. "About the contract," Elias said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded paper, the prenuptial and merger agreement she had signed. He held it up, and then, with deliberate, slow movements, he tore it in half, then in quarters. Elise stared at him, mouth agape. "What are you doing?" "I'm voiding the terms," Elias said, dropping the confetti of paper onto the nightstand. "But the debt, the company, I don't care." "About the company," Elias said. He reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I realized something last night." "What?" "I don't want to own you, Elise," he said softly. "I want to be worthy of you." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "We start over. No blackmail, no secrets, no debts." He looked at her with a vulnerability she had never seen. I'm Elias. I used to be a gardener. I like dark chocolate and I hate the rain, and I have been in love with you since I was 12 years old. Elise felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were happy ones. She smiled, squeezing his hand. Hello, Elias, she whispered. I'm Elise. I like flowers, and I think I'm falling in love with you too. 1 year later, the garden of the Carson estate was in bloom. It wasn't the manicured, stiff garden of her father's time. It was wild, colorful, and alive. Elise sat on the bench, reading a book. Carson Industries was thriving again, under new, ethical management. She was the CEO truly this time. Hey, she looked up. Elias was walking across the grass. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, smudged with dirt. He had been planting hydrangeas near the old shed. He looked happy. The lines of stress around his eyes were gone. He walked over and sat next to her, wiping his hands on a rag. I found something, he said. He pulled a small, slightly squashed chocolate bar from his pocket. Elise laughed. Really? Old habits? He grinned. He broke it in half and offered her the bigger piece. Elise took it, leaning her head on his shoulder. You kept your promise, she said softly, looking at the beautiful home, the peaceful life, the man who loved her. You took care of me. Elias kissed the top of her head. No, he corrected. We took care of each other. From the mud of a gardening shed to the top of the world, Elias and Elise proved that true love is the only debt worth paying. If you loved this reunion story, subscribe now. And tell us in the comments, do you believe in childhood promises? Type promise if you think true love never forgets. Thanks for watching.